All right, so I'm back and I'm going to talk about Psalms 95. And the reason why I'm going to talk about Psalms 95 because when I was doing my study in Hebrews 4, I love to cross-reference verses. And so several of the verses in Hebrews 4 mention a reference for me to go to Psalms 95. And so when I look at Psalms 95, and because I just want you to truly get it, I'm gonna go to it, and I was only going to focus in on maybe a few of the verses at first, but of course I think the first one that it referenced me to look at was Psalms 95 verse 11 and then 7 through 8. And so let's go to those. Let's just go ahead and read that whole little book, okay? Psalms 95, which is pretty much an invitation to worship God. And it says, "Oh come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us shout joyfully to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving. Let us shout joyfully to him with psalms, for the Lord is the great God and the great King above all gods. In his hands are the deep places of the earth. The heights of the hills are his also, The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Oh come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. For he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion, as in the day of trial in the wilderness." Let's talk about the Israelites, okay? When your fathers tested me, they tried me, though they saw my work. For 40 years I was grieved with that generation and said, "It is a people who go astray in the heart, and they do not know my ways. So I swore my wrath, okay? They shall not enter my rest." All right, so I hope you can see where I had to back it up so you could see where this came from. And so when I look at Psalms 95, I said, that thing deep. This included a formula for missing God's rest. You want to know how to miss God's rest? Let me tell you about it. When we look, Psalms 95 is quoted, talked about in a reference in Hebrews 3 and 4 as well, like I already mentioned, as a warning, okay? So today it says, "If you hear my voice, do not harden your hearts." Here we see the recipe for the missing reset or missing rest. For one, having an ungrateful heart, where we forget about the goodness of God. And these people they knew what God could do. They knew how God had blessed them in the past, but they were still ungrateful. They were still whining, complaining about any and every little thing. Another one would be failure to worship or submit, okay? This is rejecting his authority, all right? Another one would be a hardened heart. This is resisting his voice. And then lastly, testing God's patience. And that's persisting in being very stubborn and being doubtful. Again, the theme that I want to take from this Psalms 95 is ungratefulness, rebellion, and unbelief. That is what kept them from being in God's rest, and that is what will keep you from being in God's rest. Again, do not take my word. I want you to read the word for yourself, how it lays it out for you, a formula for missing out on the rest, that sacred rest that God has or intended for you. And so let's see. Yeah, it talks about the negative consequences of not doing what thus said the Lord. And so I wrote it in my bottom of my Bible: how to miss the opportunity to rest with him, ungrateful hearts, failure to worship and submit, hardening of your heart, and challenging or testing his patience due to doubt. Okay, and so again, that was what I was part of my cross-referencing of verses when I was reading Hebrews 4. So now let's talk about Hebrews 4 and just kind of let's just try and work the text a little bit. So when we look at Hebrews 4 and verses 1 through 2, this talks about the promise remains, okay? God's rest is still available to us, but unbelief shuts us out. And so when we read verse 1 through 2, it says, therefore, since a promise, since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. For indeed the gospel was preached to us as well as to them. But the word which they heard did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in those who heard it. Okay? Again, I made note in my Bible that, it requires more than just having a knowledge of the word. Okay, we've got to live it and walk it out. Okay, and so here we have, people that had an opportunity to enter into that rest, but because of their doubt, their unbelief, their lack of faith, that kept them from being able to have the everything that God had intended for them to have. And so when we look at verses 3 through 5, it's rooted in, talks about being rooted in God's finished work, okay? Just as he rested from creation, we rest in Christ's completed work as well. So when we read verse 3 through 5, it says, for we who have believed do enter that rest, as he has said, so I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. Okay, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world, for he has spoken in a certain place of the Sabbath day in this way, and God rested on the Sabbath day from all his work. Okay, and then verse 5 reads, and again, in this place they shall not enter my rest. Okay, he intended for us to live in abundance and overflow from the beginning. Okay, yes, some say, well, if he didn't want them to eat from that tree, why? It's all about being in obedience. Okay, if somebody has to force you to do something, it's almost like you're just doing it. There's no I'm trying to think of the word I want to use for it. There's no I can't think of the word I want, but nevertheless, them having the opportunity to choose. Okay, when someone chooses to do right, it gives more weight, more value to the context behind it. And so that's what verse 3 through 5 is talking about. And so, this is a matter of urgency for us right now. God is giving us an invitation to worship, an invitation to rest, an invitation to one day be in that place, that promised land. And so we had all of this going on for us, but before sin, that is, Adam and Eve were at rest. They didn't have any worries, they didn't have any anxieties. They had freedom, they had opportunity to fellowship and be in harmony with God, but because they chose to listen to a serpent, the evil one, and do what God had told them not to do, which was to be disobedient, therefore their rest was disrupted. Okay, and so his promise for us, we need to focus on the key purpose and intent behind the Sabbath day. And again, that's why I referenced over in Genesis. So when we look at the next set of verses that I'm going to look at, that is really talking about, this thing being a very urgent matter. And that starts with verse 6 through 8. It says, since therefore it remains that some must enter it, and those to whom it was first preached did not enter because of disobedience. Again, he designates a certain day, saying to David, today after